right now. We've gathered quite a star-studded cast today on the Catalyst team to talk through some of these things and how we're helping our clients out. This is like the snow day that never ends. For those of us that live in the South, we have certainly non-experience with not only snow, but also long extended periods of time in working from home. So we wanted to gather some folks today, some of the thought leaders at Catalyst, and really talk through a little bit around what our customers have been engaging us for, and furthermore, how we've been helping them out kind of answer the call. And so I'll do a quick moment to introduce the panel today. I am sharing that on the screen. There's a couple guys with full heads of hair, but outside of that, we do have a well-represented team here to have a discussion today on really what, again, we've been enabling our customers to find success through this COVID outbreak. So starting left to right, my name's Jesse White. I've been at Catalyst for over a decade now, and have enjoyed not only my time here, but most importantly, working with this great team to my right. And so I'll introduce Uriah. Uriah is part of the engineering organization and is a senior consulting engineer focused specifically on security. If you've had an opportunity to work with Uriah, he may not have told you that he used to, at one point in his life, bench 410 pounds. So we'll definitely keep away from him in the dark alleys. Next on the list is Mike Talbert. Mike is a smoker aficionado at the Catalyst team and has been part of the organization for over a half a decade. And I have the privilege of working with Mike directly on our team, and he is our senior solutions architect that covers a broad range of the portfolio that we offer to Catalyst and the services engagements with our customers. Kyle MacNaughton, the one on video, is the, in fact, collaboration guy that we have on the panel today. Kyle runs our adoption practice and really helps enable organizations to scale with collaboration technologies, be that Cisco, be that Zoom, be that really any of the technologies that help cultures connect. And then lastly, on the right, we have Steve Rattacasa. Steve is joining us from sunny South Carolina today, and Steve does lots of things here at Catalyst, but primarily is responsible for our mobility practice. And when I say mobility, just to define that term more liberally, talking about how users interact with their applications, be that in the cloud, be that on-premise, be that for mobile devices around the world. It doesn't really matter. Steve enables our customers to have no borders. And he does that with some cool technology along the way. And Steve also, one thing personal about him is he is a avid coffee roaster. So hit Steve up for a pound of the beans if you're so inclined, and we will certainly satisfy you in that regard. I've had an opportunity to have some of his coffee as well. All right. Well, guys, we have quite a good group on the phone here today on this what we call open mic session. And so I've arranged a couple of conversations and really talk tracks, but ultimately just wanted to hear from our team here at Catalyst and what we've been doing and how we've been helping. So everyone in the world that's been plugged in or online or watched the news knows kind of what the big organizations are doing, right? And so we've seen, Facebook, they're doing, fund matching, right? Apple's donating millions of dollars to treat patients, Salesforce, Amazon, I could go on and on. But essentially, there's a lot of philanthropy happening right now from some of these big tech companies. But what we're going to focus on today is how organizations that may not be publicly traded or may not be a true, .com entity, how they're enabling success, and how we've been helping organizations enable success inside of their business. And so we'll dig into that a little bit here as we get going. So we're going to start off in the collaboration space. And this is an area that we've seen unprecedented demand from our customers. Some of the simpler things as far as just getting users telephone access at home, right? Lots of folks have a remote working posture already. Lots of them do not. But one of the biggest challenges we've seen here at Catalyst is many stationary workers that traditionally don't work from home. Maybe they have a desktop computer, not a laptop, and maybe they have a physical desk phone and haven't really been untethered from the organization, so to speak, have been forced to evacuate their cubicle. And so what we wanted to do is kind of start out in that range, mainly from a collaboration point today, and then we'll trend into the areas of secure remote access and mobility and how we've enabled that as well. But Kyle, I had a couple of questions that I just wanted to ask you and kind of pick your brain a little bit on what you've been doing within our client base. And so I think I'll start out again, specific to this entire paradigm shift where we've seen the explosive growth just from the public companies, right? So you take a Zoom, you take a WebEx, you take a Slack, a Google Chat, anybody in the world is offering Microsoft Teams free subscriptions for 3 to 6 months for unlimited amounts of users, right? And while that's great and very generous of them, obviously they're hoping that you'll remain loyal long after this outbreak is quarantined, if you will, and behind us. What are organizations faced with in switching platforms or in changing platforms? So let's say today they're using some on-premise, kind of system. We have had some clients doing this where they have not had a true cloud presence from a collaboration perspective, and they've been forced to move very quickly. So can you talk a little bit about, some of the challenges you've seen just here in the last literally 10 days where you've helped organizations kind of migrate away from maybe an on-premise deployment and into cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things there for sure. One definitely is if an organization is not prepared for this and they've lived in the on-prem world for a long time, that can be more of a challenge for sure. Some folks have been thinking about this and they may just be expanding what they're doing, but the cloud move can be a big hop. And one thing that is nicer today than has been in the past is a lot of companies have set up some transition or some flexible transition options. So moving from a on-prem model to a cloud model or something in between has become easier to roll out in stages rather than all at once, which was a big hindrance for a lot of people, especially larger organizations. So I think there are some advantages to cloud that come right away, but the nice thing is that there are some neat technologies that are available to on-prem to help those users be able to connect back. But I think with cloud, the idea it's sort of built around that flexibility, and even if it's just a portion of your users that are moving, you can very quickly. We're seeing a lot of organizations in response to COVID and the unprecedented time that we're in, rolling out rapid deployment options and getting people up as quickly as possible and really cutting down some of the for lack of a better term, red tape that has come with making some of those transitions. So it's definitely the vendors and the manufacturers are working to make that an easier and quicker process for customers at this time.
Okay, thanks for your feedback there. Another question that we've had frequently, and I've seen this come in multiple mediums into Catalyst, is, hey, there's a lot of incentives out there. There's a lot of programs that the manufacturers are offering, right? So can you talk a little bit about how we've helped or how some of our customers and maybe outside of Catalyst even have taken advantage of this? So I know I'll just hit a couple, right? I know that when we get to Steve's component, we'll talk about AWS and their desktop offering that they're providing free, starting April 1st, right? And then I know specifically in the WebEx front, it's pretty much, they have 2 or 3 main areas where they're enabling customers to be able to adapt to this. So one is, around WebEx expansion, right? So whether you have an active contract today or not, you can quickly deploy that. We've also seen this contact center cloud offering really come on strong here and solve some challenges for our clients in that space as well. But I know there's got to be some red tape there. I know there's got to be some gotchas. So can you take the audience through a little bit of what is really under the hood with some of these offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big one for sure, probably from a conferencing standpoint, and we've all probably seen the articles about this, and some of the challenges that organizations, some of these conferencing organizations have gone through. Thankfully, we haven't really seen any outages, but your WebEx and your Zooms. WebEx is offering, and I think even Microsoft is offering some of their Microsoft Teams collaboration at no additional cost. WebEx is offering some conferencing licenses in up to 90 days worth of licenses at no cost. And it really does seem like the vendors are working to help customers and not gouge them at this time, which is nice to see for sure. On the contact center side, I think even beyond that, some of the neat things about the newer cloud contact centers is their flexibility and some of the use cases that allow for much smaller and a way for people to communicate with their customers much easier. And maybe you have a group of people that are normally on site, they're making phone calls, they're interacting with your customers. And you may not think of that as a call center, but in essence it is. And some of these cloud call centers are able to roll that out very quickly. And that we've seen that a lot of that with these rapid deployment programs and what that opens up for quote unquote call centers that wouldn't traditionally have been called that.
Gotcha. Okay. And then if I'm an organization that doesn't have, any sort of offering, or maybe I have a small one, maybe, 10% of my organization is enabled with licenses, how do I go about, actually engaging and turning these things on for the masses?
Yeah, definitely some strategy there, some quick strategy, I guess, some battleground strategy on that. I think there are a few different ways to do that. The best way is to just contact, someone like Catalyst. Your account manager is probably a great place to start for the best way to roll that out. We've managed to put out even this week a lot of very quick, not our full adoption program that we offer, but just some user familiarization, some toolkits that we have ready to go for that, and some helpful primers, as well as some small videos and things and work guides that people can use very quickly to get up and rolling. Sometimes we have users that are familiar with WebEx from a joining standpoint, but they're not used to scheduling them and hosting them, and that opens up some other challenges for them, and we can quickly get them oriented with that and ready to roll. So talking to your sales team is a great place to start, and from there we can build a very quick rollout strategy to get that effectively rolled out to those new users.
Great. That's helpful. One more question I have just for you, Kyle, is you mentioned a word earlier in your last few sentences, the word adoption. So one of the things we have seen, again, is a lot of anxiety with users that are introduced to entirely new software applications during these sorts of times. And so what, not specifically from a Catalyst perspective, but what are the smartest organizations doing with, giving their users the ability to ramp very quickly and consume this technology, integrate it with their workflow, all those sorts of things, without taking them, for a 6-hour training class, right? How are some of these things happening that's actually moving the needle?
Yeah, and I think with all adoption, the key is really removing the discussion to be from the technology element and making it more on the human element. And I think, especially for our technical resources that may be on the call, as you're looking at these technologies, you're making those decisions and maybe quick decisions or investments that you're making in those. And that's very important for sure, that those things are validated and what they're for and what they can do. But the other side of that, and where we see, again, like you said, Jesse, the smartest organizations really thrive is when they can make that valuable to their end users. And I think even in a time like this, when we have very little time and we have to get this rolled out quickly, having a value to the end user, a use case, something that they can relate to, and this is what I do normally, and this is how it's going to make it better, and being able to communicate that quickly to the end user, instead of just focusing on the feature set and what what is all that the new technology can do. Really honing it down and making it valuable as quickly as possible for those users and for the people.
Okay, good feedback. I did, through the course of our initial conversation, think of one more that I just wanted to throw out to you. And this is something that I've always been fascinated with. We have seen across multiple platforms now some quality issues, right? And so can you touch on a little bit, from the perspective of the OEMs, or if you've heard anything yet on what they're doing to deal with that? So I can imagine, Zoom, for instance, right? They have had more users subscribe and start on the platform in 2020 than they did in all of 2019. WebEx has seen, a 60% uptick in utilization. So I know that it's the cloud, right? And I know that's important, but these guys, these large organizations are most of the time hosting these themselves. So obviously they're deploying resources based on usage and data, but we have seen a couple of issues where, some of these platforms have either choked, right? There was a Microsoft Teams issue last week. There was a WebEx issue. There's been a couple of Zoom issues. What are those guys doing in order to prepare for this kind of unforeseen demand, if you will?
Yeah, and it does seem like everybody's taking a little different approach to it. I don't know if you guys saw the article that came out, I think it was yesterday or maybe even today, about some of the limiting that even Netflix is doing to some of their services, as I'm sure they're getting hammered pretty hard as well. Yeah, as far as I can tell, there was that quick outage from Microsoft on the teams in Europe, and I don't know if they just got caught off guard or what, but they've definitely turned the corner there, and things seem to be pretty stable. I know I have seen, which is kind of interesting. I've been trying to get people to use video for a long time now, and it seemed like it was a challenge. But I have seen more people on video in the last few days than normal, than maybe ever, which is great. Although I have seen that some of those meetings are kind of struggling on that. So, I think we have to all be a little careful about how we're using the technology and be mindful of people's bandwidth needs and those sorts of things. And as my good friend Steve will maybe even mention later, right? The cloud is just somebody else's computer. So thankfully they're running some pretty supercomputers out there, and they have pretty good processing power, and they've held so far. So I think that we'll continue to see that to happen. And I've definitely had some reports from the different vendors that are assuring us that is the case.
Great. All right. For those of you out there, if you have any collaboration specific questions, you can certainly post them in the chat and we'll answer those. But we're going to transition a little bit here. We're about 20 minutes into this session, and really we're going to shift gears into the security realm. And so this is an area where we have seen, again, unprecedented demand for help with not only how to rapidly deploy new product or existing products to new users, but also how to make sure that you're providing your organization assurance and confidence in that we can not only handle this as an organization, but we have just exponentially increased our internet surface, as any company does when they send lots of users home. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you guys can employ, or that we've been asked to help with here just in the last 10 days specifically on the security side. So Uriah, I'm going to turn to you to kind of get started here. I appreciate you joining us today. I know you got lots going on, so thanks for stepping away and providing some thought leadership on the security side. So, we see organizations sometimes struggle with, on a non-snow day, if you will, security policies and framework for their remote users, right? We've seen this over and over where, users may use a shared machine, may use a friends and neighbors, a family members, whatever, to access organizational data, something that's supposed to be confidential rather, and then maybe those things linger around or something bad happens, right? And that's in a normal situation. So we have had many companies that have sent their entire workforce home. And in light of that, I just wanted to ask you a couple questions around, some of the big three things that organizations can do, to make sure that that their information stays secure, right? So when you have users, let's say you're a company of 1,000 people, and maybe you only have 250 of those employees that traditionally log in a remote capacity to access on-premise applications, right? So we know we've seen a huge shift to the SaaS world. 90% of our organizations are consuming some sort of SaaS, and lots of their crown jewels live there now. What are you seeing organizations struggle with just from a providing, access to non-traditional users that haven't traditionally accessed this in a remote capacity? Is it scale? Is it software deployments to those machines? Is it the physical nature of it? Is it legacy connections? What are you seeing along the lines of that?
Yeah, so I'd say there's no one-size-fits-all answer here that I've seen so far for organizations, seeing some different struggles, really just depending on the application, because everybody knows there's a lot of variables that can go into that, whether it's a hybrid deployment on-prem, whether you have thin clients, how many people need to access it, bandwidth constraints, all that good stuff overall, and that play into kind of the challenges that we've seen. So no one size fits all answer. However, what I've seen people be successful with so far is just really reviewing their business continuity plan overall, and how that's changed with COVID-19 here, and understanding the risks that have come up with it, and specifically risks from availability perspective overall. Some things that we've seen people evaluate and recommend that they evaluate overall is just remote access VPN redundancy and load balancing overall, throughput of capacity, whether that's throughput on a firewall or maximum number of users, that type of thing. Most vendors publish this sort of thing. My general rule of thumb is whatever they publish, take off about a third, and that's probably a reasonable capacity that that you can expect out of the device, the remote access VPN headends overall. IP address space that's configured on these, you don't want to run out of IP addresses. And then just both public and private WAN capacity, because some applications need to talk across a private WAN. So if you start putting a pretty big constraint with users coming in remotely, it might put a bigger strain on your private WAN as well at a head end overall. So lots of things to think about overall. And again, not a single one size fit all answer there, but I've seen more people be successful in that realm of just evaluating where their limitations are, where their bottlenecks are overall for a specific application.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've been polling some of our users as they've called in. We've seen, some people increasing over 80%, from a VPN utilization. So let's dig into that a little bit. Let's say that we have a particular client that does have a physical appliance with, maybe a hardware or a software limitation. Can you talk a little bit about some quick ways to remedy that? Are there virtual things that we can do? Are there cloud plays that we can employ? Are there, elastic licenses that we can apply to these devices, be it, a Cisco, a Meraki, a PAN, or whatever kind of device that an organization may have? How are organizations, kind of filling that gap right now?
Yeah, so if I can repeat that back to you just so I answer it correctly. The question is around capacity of let's say my VPN firewall head end and limitations around capacity of applications passing through it. Is that a fair?
Yeah, not only applications, and we'll dig into some of the traffic and analytics and how we can keep up with that and monitor that here in a minute, but I'm talking about a specific use case where, let's say an organization has a widget, and that widget can only support 1,000 users, let's just say, and they're a 15,000 user organization, and 6,000 of them are now headed home to work, right? What are organizations doing to kind of meet that scale? Because we've seen the ship times, right? We can't get any new hardware out there unless we're pulling it, and we did pull some stuff out of our lab and that sort of thing. But the point is how are we getting around, or how are we helping our clients get around, physical limitations? So let's just take this one step further. Again, I'm a 15,000 person shop. I have 1,000 people that traditionally use it, and now I've sent 5,000 home. What would you be doing if you were inside of that customer running their security perimeter strategy to enable that kind of massive scale, right? A 5x increase in users. How would you solve that problem today?
definitely be looking to get creative in the short term. If that meant, spinning up virtual environment that users can access, that widget that we're referring to remotely as in a shared service type environment. That would be one way to get creative with it. If we can spin up IaaS software to allow access to different applications or whatever the widget is, whether it's on-prem or if we can scale it to a private cloud or public cloud even, how I'd be trying to look to approach that.
Sure. Good. And then one more question, just to ask, and show my ignorance a little bit on this, particular technology. But, I know a lot of these physical devices, right, whether it's a load balancer or a, VPN head end or whatever, have special chips in them, right, to be able to decrypt and encrypt traffic. What you just said is you could essentially spin up in IaaS, in public cloud, in your own private cloud, a virtual instance of that same functionality. Can a basic, 8-core server with 32 gig of RAM handle 1,000 users, 2,000 users? What are the guidelines on that?
That's a great question as well. So most vendors do publish, capacity for, virtual firewalls overall that show that the capacity overall is a whole lot less because they don't have those hardware ASICs. Typically, there's no SSL offloading to a hardware accelerator overall. So you do need to take that into consideration. That may mean that you need to spin up even more instances of that virtual widget overall to scale for that capacity.
Great. And then if you're running the perimeter kind of security for an organization, you're just registering that behind a DNS. And then how are we helping our clients kind of load balance those things across multiple aggregation points? So you may have a physical box that's handling 500 users. You may have 2 new virtual boxes. How do we actually distribute that? I think that's something that a lot of people have confusion on, how those things actually get spread across those groups of resources.
Yeah, some platforms support this natively in them themselves. And Cisco has a feature called optimal gateway selection, where users can be redirected to their closest firewall, which helps with some level of load balancing. It's obviously not true load balancing overall, but the other ways we can handle it is through some load balancers, 5 load balancers to route traffic based on incoming requests and do a true load balancing to different VPN headends overall.
Gotcha. So what you're saying there is if 500 people dropped off a particular device, some of that native technology doesn't actually count that, right? It only counts incoming, not kind of active users. So there are some different techniques that we can employ there, is essentially what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great. So just to continue this narrative a little further, we've got the 5,000 people connected, 1,000 of them know what they're doing. To Kyle's point around adoption, right? This is a new piece of software, or maybe they are taking their physical machine home with them. We have seen that where users are literally carrying their physical device home, be it a laptop, a desktop, or whatever. And so what strains or challenges has that put on some of our clients around deploying that software, maybe to folks that are untethered now, away from the flagpole, if you will, and may not be, joining the domain yet, or those sorts of things, or being connected? How are we solving those problems with clients?
That's an age-old problem that we've struggled with in security as a whole. So a couple techniques that they've been around a while, they're not new, but maybe a few techniques now. So the more adoption we get to SaaS hosted management of different security applications, those devices are able to, or those endpoint applications are able to phone home without needing to access any on-premise equipment. So that's in a transition we've seen over the last 5-ish or more years. But traditionally, the struggle has been that we either need people to connect to a VPN. Some platforms support the ability to force people to connect to the VPN, otherwise they can't use the internet on the laptop, which is a nice feature and capability, but can bring some other challenges as well. The other option for allowing endpoint agents to be able to phone home is to deploy in a DMZ, the internet-facing server that the agent, while it's away from the office, can actually talk home to. So there's probably 3 different options there for users.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. And then as far as users go, is that kind of the standard protocol when we're out configuring access remotely? Let's say it's in a greenfield environment. Are you seeing most organizations configure it in a split tunneling fashion, or do you see lots of organizations kind of hauling all traffic back to corporate and then running those through internet filters, if you will, to keep those users safe while they are in fact away from the flagpole?
I would probably say 95% of the organizations we see do split tunneling overall. You ask a security guy whether he believes you should do split tunneling or not, the answer is always no. We don't think people should be doing split tunneling from a security perspective. Ideally, that traffic goes back through an edge device that is enforcing some policies. With the transition of different technologies now, some of those endpoints can have other protections on them that means you may not need to route that traffic back through a head-end data center or office over to still get those same protections. So if they have an AMP for endpoints and umbrella roaming client installed, they can still get some of those protections if you need to do split tunneling. Obviously, with COVID-19 and everybody's getting ramped up for home, you have to make sure that the network is available and on those on-premise applications are accessible. So enabling split tunneling now is really going to be the norm for a while until we get back to it's already been the norm, but application or companies that had previously not done split tunneling probably have to disable it right now to support the bandwidth needed.
Gotcha. Okay, good, guys. We did introduce a poll. If you guys don't mind taking a minute to respond to that, one of the things that we're trying to do is, again, aggregate some of this data so we can continue to build this kind of narrative, internal and external to other customers. So I appreciate you guys taking a minute and just clicking on that. It's real simple and pretty straightforward. Uriah, you mentioned something around, I use the term away from the flagpole. You say untethered, right? You say, split tunneling is bad. If you're gonna split tunnel and it's in fact mandated, or that's what we have to do to preserve resources, bandwidth, whatever, maybe you just don't have the capacity for it. What are some of the techniques that are, let's say, gratis today or free that organizations can take advantage of to help protect with that? So today I'm sitting behind the corporate firewall, right? I have some sort of, intercept that happens if I was to try to get to an inappropriate site or a torrent or whatever. And you're gonna prevent me from doing that as an employee, right? Well, now I'm at my house. I may not even be VPN'd in. I may just be out there in the wild. And so how are we helping clients kind of deal with this new reality?
I'll give you my top three things that I've been preaching to people so far. My number one priority here and it's free, is just user education and awareness. I think organizations right now should be telling employees to have a heightened sense of awareness and a heightened sense of skepticism right now. And the reason being is really twofold. And that common practice of cyber criminals for a very long time has been to try to bait people into deals that look too good to be true. Take the survey, win an iPhone, or here's an 80-inch TV for $200 or whatever, just to try to get people to click on things and get malware on their machines or whatever. It's been a common practice for a long time overall, and as we know, is the longer that we're in COVID-19 and kind of going into a quarantine and social distancing overall, we expect that the longer we're in here, the more financial impact there's going to be to not just businesses, but to people overall. So we're going to come into a period where people are getting distressed for money, and these deals are going to look very appealing that these cyber criminals are putting out there, and they're going to become more prone to falling victim to them overall. Point number one. But point number two is what we've seen so far is that we've all been pulling together, people, communities, organizations to just help each other out. These tech giants, I didn't anticipate it, but it's been awesome to see all the resources that have been dumped into just helping one another, helping businesses stay afloat. So these free licenses from different software, everybody's doing it right now, which is, again, awesome, but kind of a too good to be true scenario. So now people are seeing this free stuff come in, and these bad guys have been doing this forever, is offering too good to be true deals out there. It kind of blurs the line of what's good and bad, and I've been trying to reiterate to IT staff that I've been working with and organizations as a whole is empower your people to just raise their hand and say, this looks fishy, and bring it to the service desk and have somebody that's technically competent look at it and be able to identify whether it's real or not. So it's free. I would personally, if I were in people's shoes, be 1 to 2 emails a week, just friendly reminders of the perils of the internet and scams that are going on right now. And that's not conjecture at this point. We've already started seeing phishing attempts from COVID-19, and they are ramping up really quickly. So end user awareness, number one. Number two is just simple patching, and that means applications and operating system. And that's one where it's tough to be away from the flagpole to make sure that those things are enforced overall. But just making sure users know that if they're in a situation where they have to connect from a non-corporate asset, that they are doing those regular things and of patching, as well as just having some sort of endpoint software installed. And again, right now there's no reason organizations can't take advantage of it. There's every vendor out there is offering some sort of software that can be installed and put on machines. The challenge for IT will obviously just be getting it on there in the first place if everybody has already transitioned to moving home overall. All three of those three things.
Okay. Just, I was going to put a poll out there, but can you give me an honest answer to a question? Have you ever clicked on a phishing link, Uriah?
Yes. They're getting a whole lot better.
Wow.
Yeah. You know what? I'd say everybody's vulnerable. Even the best people. I mean, there's days when I get 2 hours of sleep and you wake up and you read an email, you skip a few words and something looks legit. They are getting a lot better. I said probably 15 years ago that I should have been in the business of writing scam emails because they were so poorly written, but they've gotten so much better now. And they're still
they have.
But yeah.
Yeah. So that's good to know. Thanks for sharing your vulnerability there with the group today. I appreciate that. We have seen, this is like the Christmas time FedEx track your package UPS sort of thing, right? And so we do know that these bad actors are taking advantage of it. So you think that educating your users, providing them with some collateral of what to watch out for is important, and I certainly agree with that as well. How about users that don't particularly interact that much with the World Wide Web, if you will? So we do have some users that are pretty much just traditional for different classes of resources. So what I'm getting at here is, if you have certain groups or people with rights to information or access to information, should you deploy the same kind of carte blanche VPN access across the board, or should organizations at this point in time be looking to segregate some of those sorts of things? We still see organizations, when we do an analysis and roadmap on them, for instance, give 10-dot access to everything over the VPN. What can organizations do just real quickly to kind of slim that down so that if they do have a vulnerable host that gets taken advantage of, it doesn't impact the entire infrastructure? What are your thoughts around that?
It's a good question, and it's a tough one to answer because you say some organizations, there's a lot of organizations that still do that. And while COVID-19 happening and everybody working from home has made the situation worse, or the landscape worse overall, the same challenges and the reasons that organizations didn't do it are still in place, and they're still going to have struggle with putting anything in place. Definitely, when I deploy any VPN, and if we're in there and it's a smaller scoped project or whatever, bare minimum, I am going in and separating out employees and contractors overall, and limiting the access to contractors, bare minimum, with just need to know access, if you will, to the resources that they need to reach.
Okay, it's good to know. Good to know. All right, we're going to shift over to Mike Talbert at this point. I want to talk to Mike a little bit around a couple of things that we've seen, kind of on the infrastructure side and on the cloud side of things. So, Mike, many organizations are now faced with, you look even here in our home state, the DHEC, website went down, right? People were, ordering tests, right? You have this huge initiative by Google. that they're putting out these self-diagnosing things, right? And so these are real things that are happening, meaning many organizations are having to scale different parts of their infrastructure in manners that they're not traditionally used to. So now we're front-ending, hundreds and hundreds of users in a different area. What are some things that you've seen our customers doing or reaching out to you for in particular to enable that sort of instant scale? Are there technologies or techniques, for folks that maybe don't have a huge cloud presence and can't rapidly spin up or duplicate services? What are organizations doing in that space, Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, in a lot of cases, what they're doing is still leveraging, cloud-like capabilities with their on-prem infrastructure, right? So one of the ways that, VMware users or even Hyper-V users can leverage that is through the various native tools to be able to, create templates, spin up, spin down, as needed. It may be more of a manual process in a lot of cases, but it's still, you're not necessarily relying on, racking and cabling up a new server to house an application, right? So the ability to do that, has really helped a lot of users. Also, too, we kind of touched on the, with some of the discussions with Uriah, but, leveraging that virtual infrastructure to spin up, resources to add more capacity for remote access VPN capabilities is another way they're leveraging, more on-prem.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. So this is, again, another kind of, silly question from me, but we do know that there are still some organizations that have on-premise backups, right? And one of the things that I've been actually wondering about is, we've seen the Iron Mountain trucks. You guys have always seen those. They ride around all the time. They're collecting people's tapes or discs or whatever and bringing them off site, depending on what their strategy is. What is happening to customers today that still are leveraging, kind of a legacy technology like that? You take these I-Series or AS400 companies that still have a back end of tape infrastructure for backup. Obviously, their data is being manipulated and changed. How are organizations dealing with that?
Typically not well. Again,
Gotcha.
with the legacy stuff like that, there's still delays. So, we a little bit about, phishing attacks and things like that are up, right? So with a lot of phishing attacks comes, ransomware and things of that nature. So, one of the best protections against ransomware is to have good backups. If a business right now is relying on, pulling tapes, either from another location or having to have them shipped in to recover their data, it could, they could be down for days or even weeks in cases like that. Whereas, leveraging some sort of, maybe non-tape or just spinning disk or cloud storage, can get you back up and running in a matter of hours in many cases.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I was seriously curious as to what's going to happen, or if somebody did have an event or an outage, and hopefully none of the infrastructure will be hit. And when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about, power, gas, water, kind of utilitarian stuff, but just curious as to what your thoughts were there. So thanks for answering that honestly. And again, I know we have had some questions around that and different strategies there. As well. Okay, so Mike, I have one more question for you, and this is one that I've seriously been, considering. And I'm going to ask everybody this, but out of this whole pandemic, if you will, I want you to predict or at least come up with an idea of how you think your specific area that you deal with on a day-to-day basis is going to change. And do you think that COVID-19 is going to get the attention of leadership inside of organizations to truly look back and say, wow, what did we learn from this? Or do you feel like this is just gonna roll over and people will continue kind of business as usual?
That's a great question and a really broad question, in which we could probably talk about that for hours. So I do think, there's definitely some technologies out there that I think will be here to stay. That maybe certain, customers may not have used in the past, but maybe, that they will now, for various reasons. I think, we've a lot of things that we talked about so far when we talked about collaboration, we talked about, Cisco and all these other vendors giving out, free licensing or free capabilities, Zoom, WebEx, Umbrella, Duo, and things like that. One of the things that, I think kind of gets lost is, hey, those are like cloud-based offerings. The reason they're able to give those out for free is because they can scale up really easily to support the workload, right? So that's one of the big advantages of cloud. I think SaaS-based offerings, the Salesforces, the O365s of the world, right? I think, people might start leveraging those a little bit more because at that point, it's a way to get around maybe hardware limitations with VPN throughput, or really just not even being able to support, the number of remote users that need to be supported. In that case, when you have, cloud-based offerings like that, it's a way to really, kind of leverage at scale computing, right, rather than your own, infrastructure and all that to support that. Users can continue to work remotely without even the need to do VPN. And I think the other thing too is, public cloud, we'll probably see an uptick in that a little bit more. Again, it offers, really a lot of the same benefits of, SaaS-based offerings, but the Azures and GCPs and AWSs of the world, I'm sure we're going to see an uptick in, in their tenancy and everything from users and utilization. So there's a lot of benefits to that, being able to, with cloud in general, being able to scale up as needed. So, and we've reaped those benefits over the last few weeks at this point too, barring some of the, the Microsoft Teams issues in Europe and all that. But again, able to quickly recover, right, and still provide a good service.
Okay, good. Have you considered changing your personal investment portfolio to encompass more of those? Are you that confident, or do you feel like there may be some people that actually get burned in these scenarios, but just kind of go back to normal?
I mean, I would have, my personal portfolio does include all of those cloud providers at this point anyway.
Okay, good.
Just because, there's still a lot of money, so to speak, left in the market for cloud in general, right? So there's, they were on the rise anyway. So yeah, they're definitely not going to go away. I think they've, it's risen to the occasion, and it's something we definitely need to call out, and make sure everyone's aware of. Is like, look, cloud is not this nebulous term that we all kind of joke about, because let's be honest, we all joke about it. I do too. But it has shown its capabilities at this point. Especially with a lot of the OEM vendors, leveraging a lot of that public cloud infrastructure to deliver, these services to our customers.
Yep, for sure. Well, good. Well, I appreciate your thoughts, and folks, you can say you heard it here first from Mike Talbert himself, that there'll be an increase in cloud consumption here after this pandemic is behind us. All right, shifting to our
is all I will ask for commission.
2%. That's right. That sounds pretty conservative. But thank you again, Mike, for your contributions today and for everything you do for our customers here at Catalyst. Steve, Steve, are you still there? I just wanted to make sure before I move to your.
I am
here.
I am, yeah.
All right, great. Sorry, I went left to right, but I did just want to kind of shift gears. One of the things that we've seen organizations, contact us about or at least inquire about is, hey, I want to check out this virtual desktop, right? We have our offering that we've been providing to the market for a while through a channel-only, partner in Green Cloud, right? Or we saw this new release today with AWS providing it for up to 50 or 100 machines, starting April 1st, et cetera, et cetera. But, I just have to ask you, if I'm an organization and, is that too late, these offers, or is that too late to try to get people onboarded? And what I mean is, if my applications live today inside a data center or inside another cloud provider, standing up new virtual desktops that I can connect really from any device to do my work, what's the real value in that? I don't have my mind wrapped around that.
I think it's unfortunately right now it's going to be leveraged because of an organization's maybe lack of preparedness for more mobile workforces that we have today. So it's super common that we see people take a laptop and want to work from, a coffee shop. Notice that I referenced coffee in my answer, and so there's going to be just a radical change in not only the applications we're consuming, but how we consume them. And organizations that maybe haven't embraced that, not only in not bringing on board maybe cloud native or more cloud friendly applications, but also in not having some kind of mobile accessibility. Right now, you can fire them up. It's not too late, but it's going to be a good amount of time and some financial investment to bring online those connections and then layer in the other things you've heard everybody else talk about, right? With getting access to things like WebEx or Zoom from within a virtual desktop presents a little bit of a challenge. And so those are the types of things that need to be considered. Connecting it back home. If the application can truly not live outside those data center walls, then you need a VPN connection back into the data center. So it's not necessarily too late, but it's certainly one of those things that as this passes, which I'm confident that it will, it's going to be one of those lessons learned that needs to be revisited from a strategic standpoint.
Sure. Yeah, I was curious about that. And again, as you intertwine all these different conversations and talk tracks together, there's obviously benefits to having, a virtual desktop service. And there's obviously some hindrance to that as well. We look at some of our call centers, right, and want to do recording and some of those different things. Yes, you can do that. Yes, there's some goodness there, but it does also present some other challenges. And so if you're an organization, Steve, and you are today a virtual desktop user, let's say you've thinned out your environment, either from a Citrix perspective or a VMware View, or, using some of those protocols that have been around a long time, be it ICA, Teradici, whatever. How can I now offer the same kind of, gigabit service, if you will, to my users that are going home and working off a cable modem? So clearly there's a difference in speed for most organizations between what you get at work and what you get at home. And so how do you see this as being a challenge, meaning, either hanging screens or just users getting frustrated, or do you feel like these protocols are now so lean and advanced that we're not going to run into that?
So I do think most of the modern ICA-like protocols are very, very lean, and that we're talking decades of innovation that have been applied to make those more media friendly. There are some technologies that allow for what they call content redirection, where it's going to not have to traverse maybe the connection that you have all the way back. But for example, if you're trying to display a video or you've got some audio, you can kind of pipe that out almost split tunnel style, as opposed to having to kind of go hairpinning back and forth over certain connections. So, with organizations that have made a motion or have otherwise embraced virtual desktops or similar type remote access technology, there's generally going to be some level of expectation and tolerance already. And now with all the vendors more or less allowing for, kind of license overruns, as long as they haven't been operating at, 80 or 90% of their capacity in the past, extending for an extra 100 or 1,000 users might not be out of the realm of possibility. Now, if it is, you have to look at, again, cloud providers of different shapes and sizes. You can look towards the public and the Azures and the Google Cloud platforms of the world. You can look at AWS is now starting April 1st. You mentioned a couple times that they're going to be offering up to, I think, 50 users for free workspaces, which is their virtual desktop as a service product. You could also look at the ones like you mentioned before of Green Cloud. It's a smaller provider, and right now everybody's kind of taking out their credit card and looking at the big guys, but some of those small guys have dedicated infrastructure that isn't going to be the first option for most. And I think that poses a great potential for solution there.
Interesting. Okay, last question for you, Steve, because we are getting short on time, and I don't. There's just a couple of questions here in the chat box, but I just want to ask you, really one more question around, something that I kind of touched on with Uriah on the security side. So lots of times during these scenarios, we have to deploy and develop new ways for our users to get access to things. So maybe people are in different places, they're using different devices. And I know this week you did a webinar for about 45 customers on the Intune product, right? What are some of the ways that organizations are solving the kind of client software issues? As I mentioned to Uriah earlier, his phrase was an age-old problem in IT. How are we helping clients solve that today from a software deployment, maybe for different things or changes at scale, right, from an automated perspective?
Yeah, so that's always been a challenge, and the way that things used to work, where you had a desktop PC tied to a corporate network, is totally different than being able to leverage essentially any internet connection that a user might have at home. And in addition, there's going to be some security things, configurations, compliances that you want to ensure exist regardless of what that device is. And technologies like Intune and those unified endpoint management platforms allow for those types of things. So you can push down security settings, you can deploy applications, and you can do so in a way that you can validate not only the compliance with those policies, but you can also layer in some configurations. So if you are going to push down some of the Office applications, you're not asking the users to try to configure their connection back home, to an Exchange server. And the user's going to be able to launch things. They're going to be able to connect and operate as if they were in that traditional workplace where they sat at a desk, on a desktop computer. There's a lot of different technologies for that. And then I also think there's an element of applications, and maybe this is a little bit less of kind of the bread and butter for groups like ours, but evaluating these applications that are requiring all of this kind of
all circuits are busy. Please try your call again later. Announcement 8, switch 139-103.
I'm not sure if you guys all heard that, but I certainly did. But yeah, like I think there's an application conversation to be had. There's some sort of development team or development evaluation, or even just a corporate-wide technical debt strategic evaluation that's required after events like this, because at the end of the day, what we need to do is connect users to the data and applications, and then we need to connect the users to each other so they can collaborate. And I think a lot of the problems that we're dealing with right now are getting the users to connect to the applications. And if those applications look a little bit more cloud friendly or cloud native, we don't have to jump through as many hoops. They can be secure by design. They can be flexible in their scale out and scaling up. There's just it's a different conversation, but it's I think a really, really important one to have.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for that feedback and guidance there. Guys, I have learned more than I thought I would from this conversation. One of the greatest questions that I have ever been told to ask my children is, tell me one thing that you learned today at school that I don't know myself. And so all these questions that I did ask were things that I didn't know. And I am walking away, I feel like, more prepared to help, serve, the community in this time of need. And I feel like you guys have really blown the audience away with not only your thought leadership, but also the way that you guys showed humility in your answers. And so that is certainly one thing that I always appreciate about working with you guys. And so thank you again for your time. Sam, this is really, a time sensitive topic, and I know we're going to be doing some more. So I'll just let the attendees know we will be sending out some different feedback, not only on this message, but also on other topics or areas you'd like to dig into. And as Kyle mentioned earlier, if you do have a particular need or request that maybe Catalyst isn't your go-to for, please do let us know. And we can, if we don't have the skills internally to help, we can certainly point you in a direction where you can get that problem solved. So we thank everyone for your time today, and to my panelists that again did such a great job. I will put you a small gift of my appreciation in the mail, and maybe you'll get it by the summer. Thanks again for joining today, guys, as we covered many of the challenges of COVID-19 and how our customers are responding to it. We thank you not only for your attendance, but feedback and questions, and we'll talk again real soon. Thanks for joining the Catalyst Open Mic. Bye-bye.